Well, as you guys may know, just a couple days ago was Apple's keynote at one of the most anticipated tech events of the year, WWDC 2018, where they have their developer conference. And there was a lot of really cool new stuff announced. So what we're going to do is skip the boring stuff and just talk about all the cool stuff. And the one thing to know about this year is that they didn't announce any new hardware, but they focused completely on software. So they wanted to make things performance-wise much better, and they did announce a lot of new software features that are pretty cool, and so that's what we're going to talk about. So we can start off with iOS 12. That's the first thing they talked about, and like I mentioned, one of the main focuses on this update from iOS 11 is going to be performance. And this iOS 12 update is going to support the same number of devices that iOS 11 supports way back to devices in 2013, and they say that it's going to be 40% faster for like launching apps, and for example the camera, opening the camera is going to be 70% faster. So that is a huge performance increase, especially if you're using more than a couple years old device. This should be really something you look forward to, even if you're on a new device. They also made some improvements to augmented reality. So as you know, they have their AR kit, and they actually announced ARKit 2, so it's just an update to that. And they also talked about a new augmented reality file format that will allow people more easily to make like 3D objects that you can use with the iPhone, that sort of thing. And here's a really cool feature they announced, which is shared experiences in AR apps, games, whatever. So if you're playing an AR game with one phone, someone else can join in, and you can have like a little competition and both see the same augmented reality surface or world or whatever you're looking at. And here's the crazy thing, you can actually have like a third observer who can watch the two people playing in one augmented reality world, and everyone can see the same thing, move around, see the same thing in space. Pretty nuts. Another cool app they announced is a native measurement app using AR. So there's been apps in the past that I've even mentioned where you use augmented reality, you kind of point it at something and then point it at something else and it'll determine the distance between them. But presumably if Apple is making something like this, it's going to work a lot better as a native app than any other third-party app ever will. And it had some cool features like pointing it at a photo and it will be able to determine the dimension of the photo. So I'm pretty excited to see at least how well that works. Next, they talked about Siri, which as we know, Siri basically sucks compared to like Google Assistant. But they did talk about a new feature they're calling shortcuts, which is pretty cool actually. And it basically will allow you to program a shortcut, a custom shortcut, where you basically say a key phrase and then program multiple steps, even from multiple apps, that Siri will perform. And there will be a shortcut editor where you literally just drag and drop actions from different apps, like show the weather or do this in Uber or something like that. And when you say one key phrase, it'll do all those things at once. So that's actually pretty cool if you do have a set of instructions you want to do, maybe control all your smart home devices in the morning and say wake up, something like that. The next section they talked about was for digital wellness, kind of very similar to what Google talked about at their keynote. And basically the whole idea is that they want to introduce features into the operating system to make us less distracted by our phones and stuff. So the first thing they talked about was do not disturb. One thing they added there is that at bedtime, it will no longer even show notifications on the screen. It'll be hidden by default. Of course, you can show them if you want. So the idea is that when you wake up, then you're not bombarded by a million different notifications that may have occurred during the night and get you riled up, I guess. I don't know, give you anxiety from all the stuff you have to do. So it just shows the time. And then another thing you can do with Do Not Disturb is they kind of improved it so you can actually do a temporary Do Not Disturb where you can set it Do Not Disturb for the next hour or something like that, which I think is really cool. You don't always want to put it on and then forget it's on and then not get any notifications. Speaking of notifications, they also added a way where you can do instant tuning. So you can basically, I think, long press on a notification and then it'll instantly give you options to make it so these notifications will appear less, turn off the notifications for that specific app, that sort of thing. And finally, they brought back grouped notifications. This was one of my biggest gripes with iOS, the fact that if you got like a million group text messages, they would all show separately instead of like one group block, and you wouldn't be able to see anything else because they'd be pushed out of the way. And they used to have a feature way back, and I think it was like iOS 8, where they would have group notifications. They took the feature out. Finally, now it's like Android, where you can swipe away an entire group of notifications. It doesn't block everything below it. So much better. I am super excited that they finally brought back grouped notifications. The third thing with digital wellness they talked about was being able to see how much you're using screen time with certain apps. There's going to be like an analytics dashboard where you can even see how many times you unlocked the phone, launched different apps, how many times you used an app, used that app for how long, all sorts of crazy stuff, and set limits so it'll warn you, all right, you've used this app too long, and you can have the option where it'll block it, and you can unblock it, of course, and then warn you you're using too much time, that sort of thing. So a lot of this stuff very similar to what Google did, but it's nice that they're adding it. And then finally for iOS, we can talk about the messages and FaceTime updates. So with messages, they added this feature called Memoji, where it's really dumb in my opinion, but I know some people are going to get a kick out of it, I guess. Where basically, you know how there's Animoji where you use the face cam to animate a head of an emoji? Well, now you can create your own head, which is going to be looking like you, I guess, and then animate that and put it into pictures and take a selfie with that, and it'll overlay your Animoji over it. All sorts of nonsense if you're into that sort of thing. Also with FaceTime, here's a cool thing they actually did add, is you'll now be able to use FaceTime with up to 32 people at once. I don't know how that's gonna work. I mean, I assume it's not going to show all the people at once, no way. It will automatically bring the person talking to the front. So I guess that's cool if you really like to use FaceTime. And yeah, they're gonna allow you to use the Memojis in FaceTime. God, it's so stupid, but again, I just know there's going to be people who are like really into that. So that covers all the stuff with iOS that I thought was worth mentioning. The next thing they talked about was WatchOS 5. Not as much to talk about here. We can really go through this quickly. First of all, they added a few new workout types. So yoga and hiking, you can now add that into the Apple Health thing. And then also you'll be able to use a walkie-talkie feature, which is kind of cool if two people have Apple Watches. Maybe make it easier to talk to each other. There's also a new way to interact with notifications, so you can like rate things on Yelp right from the notification, or I think it even supports like rating Uber rides, that sort of thing, just easier to access stuff. And also it's gonna allow some WebKit content, so you'll be able to actually browse the web, I guess, in some situations using your Apple Watch. And obviously this isn't going to be for like every website because the screen's so small. So particularly if it supports reader mode, where there's just a little bit of text you want to read, you could do it on the watch. And they're piloting a new feature which will allow student ID cards to be used on the Apple Watch. So some universities will allow that, and this will presumably be expanded into a lot of other maybe store cards or something like that, where I am assuming this is using NFC, so you can just hold the Apple Watch up to some sort of scanner, and then all the information's in there. All right, now the next section was about Apple TV. Again, just a few things we can talk about here. The first thing is that Apple TV 4K will now support Dolby Atmos, so that's a pretty unique 3D surround system that Dolby has. Also, they're going to have some new live viewing options for like sports and news from some cable providers. And finally, they're going to have a thing called Zero Sign-On. So if you have broadband that is also from a cable provider, then you won't have to log in to that cable provider's app anymore. It'll detect that you're on the same broadband as that provider and then give you access to those apps automatically. So that's kind of cool, not a huge deal, just neat. And finally, the big section they talked about was for macOS Mojave, the new version. So that actually did have some significant upgrades in there. So the first is kind of minor, dark mode, so that's kind of cool. There's also a thing called dynamic desktop where it'll actually kind of change the wallpaper depending on the time of day. That's pretty neat. It'll change like a picture of a nighttime picture at night, and I guess it changes in a way that's very subtle, so you might not even notice. They're also introducing a new type of sorting on the desktop called desktop stacks, so you'll be able to actually like stack groups of icons either by type, tag, or date, that sort of thing. So it's kind of like a folder, but not a folder, if that makes sense. Also in Finder, there's a new view mode called Gallery. So this will basically have a big giant thumbnail like you would expect in Windows Gallery preview mode, but except with this, it's not just for images. It'll also be for like PDF documents or PowerPoints or whatever. You can actually preview the whole thing right in Finder. Then next, there will be new screenshot updates. So when you take a screenshot, you can now edit and mark up the image right after you take the screenshot, kind of similar to how iOS is. That's always nice. And also, here's another really cool feature that I was really surprised by. It's called Continuity Camera. So basically, say you're editing a document on your Mac and you want to, I don't know, add a photo of something, you can basically right-click on it and do Continuity Camera, and it'll open up your camera on your phone so you can take a picture of something on your phone and it'll automatically sync back to that document. And you can actually automatically scan documents. It doesn't have to be a picture of something in the real world. So this will be a really easy way to add things in the real world onto your document right away. They're also making it way more secure in Safari for privacy. So they're going to be blocking a lot of ways that different trackers use to gather your information on websites. For example, social media sharing links and comment boxes you may see all really do use tracking information that'll block that stuff. And then also blocks fingerprinting, which is a technique where a advertiser may look at information about your browser, such as what plugins you have installed, what version of the operating system, all that sort of stuff. So even if they don't use a cookie, they can still track you across the web just from what system information you have. So now Safari, on the Mac at least, will basically make it so the advertiser will only see the most basic default information about your operating system, so they can't track you. It'll look like every other Mac. And I do actually think they are introducing this on iOS for Safari as well, so that's pretty awesome. And finally, here's another cool thing they're doing for the future, is they're announcing a year-long project they've been working on where you'll natively be able to use iOS apps on your Mac. And they're just introducing this. It doesn't support everything, obviously, and I think they're first going to be rolling this out with some native apps that are on iOS, but hopefully, maybe in the future, any app that works on iOS will work on the Mac as well if you want. So I think that's it. Those are what I think are at least the coolest announcement they talked about at WWDC, the keynote this year. And if I missed anything, if you guys thought there was something really cool I didn't mention, we can talk about that down in the comments. If you want to keep watching, I'll put some other videos right here. You can just click on those. And if you want to subscribe, I make a couple new videos every week, so it should be worth it. So thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.